Welcome back to the deep dive. So we're doing something a little different today.
Yeah.
Usually we take a whole stack of books, maybe a bunch of articles, and kind of synthesize them.
hmm
Today we are taking a single moment in time, specifically the morning of August 27th, 1865, and we are just unpacking a single speech.
Right. A sermon by Charles Spurgeon called Heart's Ease.
Exactly. And before you tune out thinking, this is just some old religious history, I want to frame the mission here, we're not really analyzing theology just for theology's sake.
No,
We are analyzing crisis management.
that is the perfect way to put it. Because if you look at the context, this was not a standard sleepy Sunday service.
No.
This was a room full of people who felt like their entire world was ending. Spurgeon himself calls it a peculiarly gloomy season.
Which honestly sounds like a massive understatement.
It really is.
Right. So let's set that scene. I was reading the background on this. And London in 1865, it sounds like the setting for some kind of post-apocalyptic novel.
It really does.
It wasn't just one thing going wrong. It was like everything hitting at once.
It was a total convergence of crises. And to get the psychology of this sermon, you have to understand what these people were reading in the papers that morning. First, and most terrifyingly, you had cholera.
And we're not talking about like a stomach bug. In 1865, cholera was pretty much a death sentence.
It was rapid. It was fatal. There were no antibiotics, no IV fluids. Spurgeon uses this phrase, stretching its wings of death.
Wow.
It was filling the early graves in the city. So every single person in that room was thinking, am I next? Is my kid next? There's this thick biological fear hanging over everything.
Okay, but then you layer the economic disaster on top of that. This is the part I found fascinating because I never even heard of it. This murrain.
Yes, the cattle plague. It's such an old word now, murrain. But in 1865, it was an absolute economic catastrophe. This disease was wiping out livestock all across England.
So what does that actually mean for the average Londoner?
It means the food supply is it's disintegrating. Meat prices are going through the roof. Farmers are going bankrupt overnight.
Oh.
And just to, kick them while they're down, the weather was horrendous. Constant rain up in the north of England, which was rotting the corn crops right in the fields.
So you have a meat shortage and a grain shortage at the same time.
At the exact same time. It's the definition of a supply chain collapse.
Right.
And then, of course, because people are stressed and desperate, the newspapers are full of stories about fearful crimes. Society just feels like it's fraying at the edges.
And for Spurgeon, there was one more layer to this, kind of a spiritual anxiety. He talks about the rise of popery.
He does.
And yeah.
We have to see this through his 1865 lens,
Mm-hmm.
He was deeply concerned about the rise of Catholicism and a kind of high church Anglican ritualism.
Today, that might seem like just a denominational squabble, but for him, it was. It felt existential, didn't it?
It was an existential threat. He saw England's Protestant identity as a sort of bulwark of safety.
Yeah.
He truly believed that if the nation drifted toward what he called the dominion of Antichrist, they would lose divine protection.
So his listeners are feeling physically unsafe because of cholera, financially ruined because of the plague and the weather, and now spiritually under siege.
It's the perfect storm.
That's the context. So the whole goal of this deep dive is to pull out Spurgeon's formula for heart's ease, his term for staying calm, right in the middle of that storm. He's looking at Psalm 112.7. He shall not be afraid of evil tidings. So how does he start? You'd think a preacher would stand up and say, don't worry, everything is going to be fine.
But he does the absolute opposite. And this is where the psychological brilliance of it comes in. He starts with a massive reality check.
He does.
He basically tells them, you are not special. Bad things are absolutely going to happen to you.
It's so blunt. He says being a believer or, a good person, it gives you zero immunity.
Zero. He calls it a bitter morsel that we all have to chew on. He says, we are not above the shafts of adversity.
So if you think your faith is some kind of insurance policy against tragedy,
You are going to be severely disappointed. He actually lists out the tragedies they should expect. It's almost like he's inoculating them against the shock.
Okay, let's walk through that list because he hits every single pain point. He starts with family.
Yeah, and this is the hardest one. He warns them that their children might not survive childhood. He says their sun may go down ere it is yet noon.
Which was a very real fear back then.
A very real fear. But he connects it to a warning about idolatry. He says if we make our spouses or our kids into our idols, if we think we can't exist without them, we're just setting ourselves up for a crash. They're loans, he says, not possessions.
Then he moves to wealth. I loved the imagery he used here. He says riches have wings.
Yes. And he points out that even if you clip the wings, some bird of prey can just come and snatch them away.
Right.
He talks about ships sinking, markets changing, fires with no insurance. He describes these enterprises high as the Tower of Babel, suddenly just rocking and falling. It's a reminder that the economy is so fragile.
That resonates just as much today as it did then.
It really does.
But the one that felt the most personal for Spurgeon himself was reputation. He talks about saying, "Farewell to my character."
That was such a moment of vulnerability, wasn't it? Spurgeon was a celebrity, basically.
Yeah.
He was famous, which meant he was a huge target.
Yeah?
He tells the congregation that he said farewell to my character years ago. He's just admitting, I've been slandered, I've been misunderstood, I've been attacked in the press.
He's telling them, stop crying because someone said something mean about you. It happened to me. It happens to everyone who takes a stand.
Exactly. He asks, who are you, my fine sir, that you should escape? It's got this snap out of it kind of energy.
It really does.
But there's one more category of evil tidings he brings up that I found really interesting because it feels so modern. He talks about science.
Ah, the learned quarryman.
The learned quarryman.
Yeah.
We have to remember the intellectual climate here. Darwin's On the Origin of Species was published in 1859.
Just 6 years before this.
Just 6 years. So the scientific community is digging up dinosaur bones and finding evidence that the Earth is way older than the church had been teaching.
He mentions infusorial atoms and this idea that we sprung from monkeys. This was like the cutting edge of anxiety for a religious person in 1865.
They thought science was killing God.
Right.
But notice Spurgeon's reaction. He doesn't panic. He just dismisses the fear of the science.
Yeah.
He basically says, let the geologists dig. The truth of the Bible has survived attacks before.
He brings up Voltaire, right?
Yeah, he mentions Voltaire predicting the end of Christianity, and then he just points out, well, Voltaire is dead and the Bible's still being printed. He frames these intellectual threats as just another noise, like the cholera, like the weather, that shouldn't shake your internal foundation.
So we've established the landscape. You've got disease, financial ruin, slander, existential doubt.
Everything.
The natural human reaction is just panic. But Spurgeon argues that panic is not just unpleasant. It's actually dangerous.
He makes a very sharp distinction here. He asks this question, if you are distracted as other men, what is the value of that grace which you profess?
In other words, if a believer panics just like a non-believer, then your faith is kind of useless in a crisis.
Practically speaking, yeah. It offers no advantage. But he goes deeper than just, looking bad. He argues that fear actually makes you do bad things.
This is the concept of evil shifts.
Evil shifts, exactly.
Unpack that for us.
It's this idea that when we're terrified, we look for shortcuts. We look for these unethical escape hatches.
Like what?
Well, if you're terrified of going bankrupt, maybe you cook the books. If you're terrified of losing your reputation, maybe you lie or you throw someone under the bus.
So fear is the precursor to corruption.
Precisely. Fear drives you off the straight and narrow path of duty. And to illustrate why calm is so essential, he uses this fantastic analogy, the old sailor versus the landsman.
I love this visual. It's so cinematic.
It is. So you've got the landsman, the guy who's never been to sea. A storm hits, a big nor'wester. The boat starts rocking like crazy. What does the landsman do?
He freaks out.
He flusters. He screams. He gets in the way of the crew. Spurgeon says he should be put under the hatches. Basically, lock him in the basement because he's a liability.
And then you have the old sailor.
The old sailor, or the captain. He's seen storms before. He respects the danger. He's not in denial, but he remains quiet. He waits. He gives orders to the pilot.
And his point is that the panicked person is useless.
Worse than useless. He says the flurried people cut their own fingers and they push down your house about your head when you meant to have propped it up.
That is a profound image of self-sabotage. You try to save yourself through panic, but you actually just accelerate the disaster.
So if panic destroys us, the solution is what he calls heart's ease, or a fixed heart.
Okay, a fixed heart. This is the core of the solution. So what does it actually mean to be fixed?
It's about preparedness. It's a mental framework that you have to lock in place before the crisis hits.
Right, you can't build the foundation during the earthquake.
You can't.
Yeah.
And he breaks it down into 3 specific pillars.
Okay, let's go through them. The first one is being fixed in duty.
This is what I kind of call the no policy policy.
No. The no policy, meaning you don't have a strategy other than just doing the right thing.
That's it. The person with a fixed heart doesn't ask, okay, what's the clever move here to save my skin? They just ask, what is the right thing to do?
There's a quote here I highlighted. If the skies wanted propping with sin, it is no business of mine to prop them.
Isn't that incredible?
It's so bold. Even if the sky's falling, I won't do something wrong to try and stop it.
It sounds risky, but Spurgeon's point is that it's actually liberating. It frees you from all the anxiety of calculation. You don't have to play 4D chess with the universe. You just do your duty. The outcome isn't your problem.
That leads right into the second pillar, which is fixed in knowledge. This seems to be about how we interpret pain.
Yes. He uses a medical analogy. He talks about a surgeon using a lancet, a knife, or giving a patient poisonous drugs to cure them.
Okay, so if you didn't know anything about medicine, you would think the doctor was trying to kill you.
You'd scream, "Why are you cutting me? Why are you giving me poison?" But because you have the knowledge that the doctor is a healer, you accept the pain. You trust the intent.
So you reframe it.
You reframe it. Spurgeon says the fixed heart views even the worst calamity as the wisest thing that could happen because they believe the great physician ordained it.
It's a cognitive reframe. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start assuming this is for my ultimate health.
Which brings us to the third pillar, and honestly, this is the one that hit me the hardest. Fixed in resignation.
This is the daily lease idea.
This is such a brilliant psychological tool. Spurgeon says our anxiety comes from this false sense of ownership.
Okay.
We think we have a 50-year lease on our health. We think we own our families, our eyes, our limbs. So when we lose them, we feel like we've been evicted unfairly.
Right, we get angry.
We get angry. We feel like our property rights were violated.
But Spurgeon says we're just tenants.
We're day-to-day tenants. He says if you wake up every single morning and you renew the lease, if you consciously say, okay, I acknowledge everything I have actually belongs to God, and he might take it back today, then you're not shocked when it happens.
But it sounds kind of bleak, though, waking up every day expecting to lose everything.
It sounds bleak, but the effect is actually gratitude. If you think you own it, you take it for granted. If you know it's a temporary loan, you're incredibly grateful just to have one more day in the house.
So it shifts your perspective from entitlement to appreciation.
Exactly. He calls it Abrahamic faith, that willingness to sacrifice what is dearest to you at a moment's notice.
It completely flips the value system.
Yeah.
And to illustrate that, he tells the story of the pocket handkerchief.
And the man with 1,000 pounds, yeah.
Tell that story because it's such a simple way to visualize this.
So Spurgeon has a friend who is carrying 1,000 pounds in his pocket.
Which is a massive fortune in 1865.
A huge fortune. And he's got it wrapped in just a handkerchief. A pickpocket comes along, steals the handkerchief, but misses the roll of money inside.
Okay.
And the friend tells Spurgeon later, I never thought at all about the handkerchief. I was so full of joy at finding the money was not gone.
The lesson being, keep your eye on the real treasure.
That's it. Spurgeon is saying all these things we worry about, our bank accounts, our status, even our physical bodies, that's all just the handkerchief. The gold is your soul, your eternal connection.
If you lose the wrapper, but you keep the treasure, you're fine.
Right. But most of us spend our entire lives just crying over the wrapper.
That's a great way to put it, crying over the wrapper. But here's the pushback, and he anticipates this. This level of detachment is incredibly hard.
Oh, it's so hard.
You can't just, mind hack yourself into not caring if your kids get cholera or your business fails.
No, you can't. And Spurgeon knows that. This isn't stoicism. He's not saying suppress your emotions. He's saying you need a foundational trust in the character of God.
Yeah.
You have to believe that the being running the universe actually loves you.
And this is where he brings in the story of the storks of Delft. This was the emotional peak of the sermon for me.
It's a heartbreaker. He recounts a story about a fire in the town of Delft in Holland. There's a stork's nest on a roof that catches fire.
Mm-hmm.
The mother stork tries to carry her young away, but they're too heavy or too young to fly. So instead of flying away to save herself, which she could have done easily, she just covers the nest with her wings and burns to death with them.
Such a visceral image of sacrificial love.
And Spurgeon's argument is just simply this. Can it possibly be that God has less affection for his children than a bird does?
Wow.
He uses that image to drive home the point that if you're in the fire, it's not because God abandoned you. He's in the fire with you.
He also uses the testimony of a Dr. Payson to back this up. Who was that?
Dr. Payson was a well-known minister from that time. He developed this really painful illness, became a cripple, and was pretty much confined to his house. But he wrote that he was happier in his sickness than he ever was in his health.
Wow.
He realized that losing the earthly comforts just made him rely more and more on God's presence.
It's that idea that you don't know God is all you need until God is all you have.
Precisely. And that leads us right to the final anecdote of the sermon, which I think just sums up the absurdity of despair for a believer, the dream story.
This is a great story. So there's a husband who is in this deep despair over a business loss.
Inconsolable, can't eat, can't sleep.
Right. And the next morning, his wife comes down to breakfast, and she is looking absolutely miserable, wearing black mourning clothes, like someone just died.
Yeah. And the husband asks her, what's wrong? Who died?
Ugh. And she says,
I had a terrible dream. I dreamed that God was dead and all the angels were crying.
and the husband, being the rational theological guy, says, don't be foolish. God can't die. That's impossible.
And her face just instantly brightens up. And she says, I did it to rebuke you. You've been acting all week as if God were dead.
That is a mic drop moment.
It really is. It totally exposes the functional atheism that's hiding in our anxiety. If you believe God is alive and piloting the ship, then why are you mourning as if the ship has already been lost?
So bringing it all back to the mission, Spurgeon's heartsease isn't about positive thinking or, ignoring the cholera.
No.
It's about this three-step process. Fix your duty. Do the right thing no matter what. Fix your interpretation. Trust the surgeon even when the knife hurts. And fix your resignation sign, that daily lease, and just hold everything loosely.
And, we should probably mention the alternative he gives. Because Spurgeon leaves the listener with a pretty terrifying or else.
He does. He draws a really clear line in the sand.
He says if you don't have this fixed heart, if you don't have this connection to the divine, then you are an orphan.
An orphan in a hostile universe.
Exactly. He says the stars in heaven fight against you. Without that providential care, life is just random, cold chaos. The cholera is just biology. The financial ruin is just math. There's no meaning, just suffering.
He paints that bleak picture to drive the listener to seek the shelter he's offering.
He does. It really forces you to choose a worldview. Either you're the captain weathering the storm with a pilot you trust,
Or you're the landsman screaming in the dark.
that's the choice. And whether it's 1865 London or, the 2020s, the storms keep coming. So the formula, it remains pretty relevant.
Well, that is a lot to chew on. That's our deep dive into Spurgeon's heart's ease. We hope it gave you something to think about next time the headlines get a little gloomy. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.